Welcome to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. This podcast is all about conversations about healing and rising from the ashes of your grief and trauma. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Zampatella. It is my sincere hope that this podcast is going to give you the words and the understanding to help you heal through your grief and trauma. When somebody is contemplating suicide, it's one thing to ask it, like to cry out for help.
Yes.
It's another thing to be like, no, I'm going balls to the wall and I'm actually going to take all the medication.
Yes.
And that's a slippery slope, right?
Yes.
And that, does she have any, then you start looking into history and everything. And I, by no means, and I just want to make this really clear, by no means am I saying that people who attempt suicide are not, don't have a cry for help, but that goes in gradations.
Yes.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And often unrecognized.
Right.
Yes.
And did she have other cries out for help? Like I'm hoping we can get into that because I've got all the questions.
Yeah.
But I want you to be able to finish here.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can go back to any point that you want.
Sure.
So, she went to the hospital and basically she hadn't taken enough med or had enough alcohol that it would have actually taken her life. Now, whether she knew that or not, I don't know. I really no idea. But so, when we all left there, it's a challenge because you're on eggshells because you want to help, but you don't want to overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
And you're recognizing obviously that, okay, that's when I started visiting the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention to learn more, because I'm like, okay, this is not just someone who may or may not be bipolar or someone. This is serious, and it was definitely like a big wake up call, But she refused to go to treatment. She didn't want to do that. I can't explain that. I'm not sure why, but I think she just had it in her head that this was what she wanted to do. And I'm not sure, but so if we flash back to where I diverted my conversation, I think, she and I had not really been speaking much that week that she passed because she was just really up and she was just really angry and frustrated and whatever she was feeling inside. I would call and I would leave messages and I would be like, I'm thinking of you and I hope you're okay. Please call me. And, a couple of days would go by and it was then Thanksgiving morning. And I called her and I said, listen, I know you're having a hard time. And I'm sure you're going to see the kids for Thanksgiving, but I just want you to know I'm thankful for you. And that's the last thing that I left on the voicemail. As it turns out, she had passed in the wee hours that night. And so I don't think she ever heard it. You can't pinpoint it that closely, but I don't think she actually ever heard it. And, it's unfortunate. And, I guess, what is done. There's not much you can do post except learn from it and do this, share, try and bring awareness, to it. But, and then I kept calling and calling and calling. She wasn't answering. And I went outside on my deck and I said to my husband, I need to call the police. And I'm going to drive up to Maria's. And he goes, no, you're not. And I said, I think she's gone. And he said, then you're definitely not going. And he said, we're going to call the local police and they'll do a well check. And when they did the well check, they broke in and they found her. And so, unfortunately, she met her demise at that point. And so then, yeah, it's about her and it's about all of us, what we all went through. But, that day, like, when the police called me back, I had to call her husband, and they were still married, even though they had moved. She had moved out. Sure, it was. I think she moved out in May, and it was November. So, and they weren't doing well. They didn't have a good communicative relationship at that point. But I had to call him and tell him what happened. And I just, my neighbor came and sat with my kids, and I drove to her house and to his house, their house, and I told him, and then I was with him when he told their children. And then that was the worst day of my life. But then I had to go tell my father, who I didn't share this piece, but it's pertinent. He had just had open heart surgery the week before, or 2 weeks before, and had a valve replaced, and he was in a recovery center for the valve. And I had to go there and tell him that we lost her. And, I went there with him, and her husband went with me, and Dave, my husband, and we had to tell my dad. And as soon as we got into the private area where we were going to speak, he goes, no, what happened? What did she do? Because he could see it in my face. And I told him, and he was at risk because of his heart, but I had to tell him. And then we planned, the funeral and all of that. And that day of the funeral, we went to the facility where my dad was in his recovery for his heart. And his doctor said, okay, he can go. He's clear to go to the service. And we went to pick him up, and we were getting a bite to eat beforehand, and he aspirated because he was so upset. And so now he's going to the hospital because he's aspirating, and I think I'm going to lose him too now. And, I was like, geez, it's all too much, and, he was okay. He did not make the service. It was recorded for him, for us, by our wonderful pastor and a church family. But something happened to the recording, and it didn't work out. And so my dad was never able to actually see it to put closure to it. But, and then there's the whole process that you go through when you're preparing funeral arrangements and all of that. And it's very different. I've been through a lot of different losses, and I can tell you the preparations for someone who dies so suddenly with no explanation, and not one you're going to give publicly until you really can understand it better. It was really hard to do. The whole thing was hard. And my children, I had to come back and tell my children what happened. And then, and then what my family suffered through during that period. They were very close to her. But I'm thankful because they had that, It's hard, but they had it. So, there's some more to the story that we can do a little digging with if you like, but feel free to fire some questions, because I'm sure there's some, more clinical questions that would help your patients and everyone else.
Not only that, I mean, yes, I got all the questions, like I said, and at first I just, I've known parts of this story.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think I should have had issues with me. But I've never heard the entire story. So the first thing I just want
weird, isn't it, that we've gone 40 years and or 28 years, and
never heard the whole thing. And I'm just so thankful that you're willing to talk about this. I know every year I contact you around that time of year. I'm
yes, you do, faithfully. Yeah.
And, but knowing more about the history of it, God, there's so many. So I guess one of the questions, like, I want to ask how you've been doing since then. Like,
Okay.
how do you get to the point where you've gotten now? Because it's been years,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, obviously, still brings up a lot of feelings and all. But
Yeah.
so, but can I ask, like, what did you notice happened with her children,
Mm,
like during and like just like I mean, before and after this happened, like
yeah.
what happened to them?
Well, I mean, they were already dealing with a split home, a divided home at the time. So that was already really challenging for them at their ages. They were 15 and 13. And my niece, the first thing that we saw as challenge was it was 2 weeks, week and a half before her 16th birthday, and they were having a sweet 16 birthday party for her. Um, and I got to hand it to her father because he and his sisters and me and my side of the family, we all pulled together and gave her her sweet 16 party,
Oh my God.
which it was right around, you know I guess during the my children's lifetime, those parties became a much bigger deal
Mhm.
than they ever were for people my age, your age. You were lucky if you got a happy birthday or a cake or a card or it
Yeah.
was not a big deal back in the day. But when this all happened, it was right in the height of it becoming a really big thing
Yeah.
and, big fun thing for kids, girls especially, and we have some other, faiths and cultures that celebrate that. But um, so, we had the party for her, and I think she showed great resilience in being able to actually enjoy her friends and the music and the food and the venue and being able to do that on the heels of just having lost her so very shortly before. It was like,
Yeah.
uh, 9 days maybe.
Oh my God. So trying to maintain some sense of normalcy
Yeah,
and continuity,
yeah.
and also address like these, because anytime you have a loss, there's all these collateral
Oh,
losses
yeah.
that go along with it, right? But trying to make it so that when she looked back at this time in her life, perhaps she'll be able to say this happened, and also I still not but
Yeah,
and also I still had
yeah,
this amazing party where
yeah.
the rest of my family surrounded me
Yes.
and protected me as best as they could.
Yeah.
When they were, when everybody was, including her, just in this, I can only imagine the amount of disbelief. And
Mhm.
that's another question I
Yeah.
had for you is like,
Well, and the anger.
or yeah, like
Yeah.
you were freaking out for a week before she had actually taken her life, and
Yeah.
then you, like, there's just part of you that knew.
Yeah.
And then, so what was that like for you, like
Yeah.
directly after she had died?
I mean, the focus was on all 4 of the children,
Yeah.
my 2 and her 2,
Hmm.
and that was the only sorry, that was the only thing outside of making arrangements and making sure that my niece got to celebrate her day.
Hmm.
So that was like the most immediate was, okay, have the service, have the celebration of life for my sister, and have the celebration of 16 for my niece. And my nephew also was, you know, yeah, there was a lot of light on my niece at the time because it was her birthday and all of that, but he was also struggling. Everybody was, and he's a very gifted musician, and he had his music, and he used to sing in the worship band at our church, and he started making music of his own. Like, he was creating music and playing it and recording it, and much like when I was a child, my thing was poetry. When my parents split and my life was falling apart, I would write poetry. I would retreat to my room and write poetry. My nephew would retreat and he would do music. And my sister loved his music. I mean, she painted, musical notes on the walls in his bedroom, and she was a fabulous mother. And so what was most in my mind is, how do we ensure that these two kids still have some semblance of a mother figure in their life, and they have three aunts on their father's side, and they have me on this side, and they had a neighbor in their childhood neighborhood who was like, hands down, there. She stood there for you. Like, she was a great woman, and it was her childhood best friend's mom. So right across the street, right across the cul-de-sac. So like, they had a really strong support system.
Mm-hmm.
And, whether that was showing up to events that they were in, or whether it was going over for family dinner, or whatever it was. And, one of the things that I think always helped my kids is we were always a very outdoor family. So from a nature therapy, and I'm a big one proponent of that, I know you are as well. We went camping every year, and I always took my niece and my nephew with us. And we joked. I joked when they were young that their mother and their father were not invited, that this was my time with them, and I would take them, and we would have a great time. And there's lots of stories and goodness. And I say all that to say, when my sister passed, a lot of people might wonder, and I'll raise it, is that she did leave a note. She did, and it was one page, and it spoke to her feeling as though she was a burden on other people. It was very textbook. I don't mean to diminish the impact of it, but it was a very textbook. It's what you would think you would find. And it was. And for quite some time, we didn't know, like, do we show this to the children? Do we not show this to the children? What's the best way to handle this? They should know, because she actually addresses them, and she had written letters to them, and it was definitely a planned event. And to circle back to the camping piece, I remember reading that letter with my nephew at our camp, alone, sitting out on a picnic bench, because it was time. It was time for him to know what happened, and that was really hard, and
You gave that a little bit of time before you
a
shared that
little
with
bit,
her.
yeah.
'Cause how old were they when she died?
13 and 15. And so that next summer, so that was November. So that next summer, like, we went camping every summer. And I brought the kids. Now I think not, I mean, the years, they've all blend together. It's very hard to say, but they came with me several times as they were older, teenagers, and then they got busy in their own lives, and they didn't really want to come, and that's okay. And she was in sports, he was doing his music, and so they were in and out of it. They were in and out. They came when they wanted to come, not when they didn't want to, and that was okay.
But it sounds like one of the things that you, like, immediately mentioned when I was like, how are the kids doing? The one of the very first things is, their community surrounded them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of times where in the loss of somebody like this, the family was fractured even beforehand
Mhm.
in very
Yeah.
painful ways. And your family had gone through
Oh,
fractures,
yeah.
had gone through losses. She was struggling in her family.
Yep.
But nonetheless, what we do know is that when somebody is surrounded by a healthy support system, you know, even with traumatic death like this,
Yeah.
um, that and coping skills, as you were mentioning, the coping skills, I don't know if people understand just how important that can be. And we've got a lot of people, especially in our society now, where we're a mobile society. People don't live close to one another a whole,
Yeah.
well, like think about your mom, like
Mhm.
hundreds of miles away, right?
Yeah.
I know when my mom and dad died last year, they're 1,500 miles
Yeah.
away. It's not like around the corner.
No.
So to be able to have this intact support system,
Mhm.
and it sounds like it was a very collaborative effort to try to surround that. How the
Yeah.
hell do you do that when you're going through your own shit? I mean, you've got your own.
Can't say I can answer that. I don't know. And, you know, at least in my family now, and I can speak to my niece and nephews after that, but in my family, we had loss after loss after loss after loss.
Mhm.
This was the third loss. She was the third loss that we had. And so my children had been through, I lost my best friend. He was only 39. And then I lost my mom a year later. And then I lost my sister a year after that. And then we lost my husband's brother the year after that. So you you're numb. To be honest, that's the only way I can describe it. And I think that I and look, you can spend your life in regret and beat yourself up over a lot of things. Like we all know that you can do that. But I think the reality of it is my mother and my father were adoptive mother and father were very strong people. And while it was nurture, not nature in my life, right?
Right.
They whatever they instilled in us, um, for me was I'm going to get through this. Not getting through it was not an option for me. And I just remember when the first passing happened and it was my best friend, I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I don't even know what to do with this. I had never experienced something like that. I had only ever lost a grandparent prior to that.
Mhm.
And so that was like a big one for me. And I remember saying, okay, it's going to be okay. You're going to be all right. It sucks, and we rallied around that family as well for a while, and then I got hit with another one. And so it was like, and I actually remember you asking me one time decades ago, like, how are you doing it? How are you doing it? And I said, I don't know. I feel like I continue to get hit by a Mack truck and I just get up again. And you were like, how do you do it? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm doing it because it's my resolve. I'm doing it because I feel I have to, because I have children that I have to model for. And I actually think there's some um, injustice in my modeling because I feel like I modeled for them. You get hit, you get up again, you keep going, you keep going. But I don't know if I did a good job in helping them understand how to process it because I was raising two little kids and had two other ones in my sister's family that was desperately trying to keep my eyes on, keep
Mhm.
my grips on. And I don't think I was capable of managing it all. I mean, who could manage all that? So I feel like I just did the best I could, which I'm fine with. And I don't beat myself up about it. But I think you just function. You just press on.
Well, hold on. There's a difference between functioning and pressing on,
Go ahead.
right? So what is that difference? When you say I just functioned,
Yeah.
you know, pressing on, a lot of people might be listening here and say, I I I press on, but I am not fucking functioning. Like
Okay.
I am just not doing that. So
Fair.
what's the how do
Okay.
you
So
say
for me, um, the function piece of it was I had a family to keep together, and I had another family that I had to participate in, and not had to, but wanted to. I wanted to do that for them and for my sister, because despite how angry I was at her in the beginning, and we can talk about those emotions because it's critical.
yeah,
Um, there's no timeline, to grief. This is your world. But I will say that you do start out numb and angry, and I think the numbness and the anger somehow fueled me.
Mm,
And that might be weird. I don't know. And I'm not really only just thinking about it now, but I think that, you know, you you feel as though you have to keep your life going at the rate your life is going. My children were in sports. They were in activities. They had friends. They had academics. I worked full time. My husband worked full time. It was, you know, we got to keep the ship afloat is basically what my psyche was saying to me. And um, what I found was, and this is, you can speak to this better than I can, but the quiet moments are when I fell apart.
oh yeah.
And I think that's very normal.
Yes, it is.
At the time, I didn't know if it was normal because I was just going through it. But I know that, when I was driving by myself somewhere, it's
Mhm.
always when I'm driving for me.
It's a lot for a lot of people,
Which
especially
is sad,
music.
right?
Yeah, and it's almost like
Unsafe,
this time.
really.
Yeah, I know it's right, but it's nonetheless it's this time where you're not surrounded by anybody else.
Yeah.
And sometimes music that's playing will,
Oh, yeah, triggers.
yeah, so songs
Yes.
come
The
up or
big trigger
whatever.
I had was the
Yeah,
Black Eyed Peas,
yeah, because
because that was a song that my sister used to sing to her children and my children.
oh,
It's so function versus pressing on. I think function was I was doing what I knew had to be done, and the pressing on was the minor amount of time I had between death events. I had 4 of them. So each one was no more than a year from the last.
mhm,
And, I don't really think that I ever processed the first one fully
mhm,
because I continued to get hit one after the next. And for other people, that could be they lost a job. It doesn't have to be a death. It
right,
could be I lost a job. I had a divorce. I had a sick child. I had a sick parent. All of those things that hit you in life, those curveballs that get thrown at you, no matter how grand or minor they are, it's how you perceive them. And it's how you respond to them that's key. And for me, it was okay, I've done this before, I can do it again.
mhm,
I'm going to do it again. And I knew, now I didn't know what was coming in front of me, but I knew this is not the last death I'm going to experience. And this is not, everyone's going to be different, whether it's an illness or a mental illness or a physical illness or old age or, whatever. It could be anything. So the pressing on piece for me was finding pockets and allowing myself to grieve when my body told me I needed to. And I'm not going to lie, I pushed it off a lot because of all the other things I've already said that you need to get your kids to school, you need to do this, you need to do that. You
mhm,
can't show up a basket case all the time, even if you want to, and inside, and that's why I think inside, you know, I feel like I'm very aware of my emotions and I always have been, but there's a lot of people that can't do that and don't understand those emotions or maybe have never felt them before. And it when it happens to you 4 times in a row, you get really good at recognizing it. So I'm sure on the first one, which was my best friend, I don't and his was not a suicide, he was ill, but, it was sudden. So, it was a pulmonary embolism. So it was I talked to him on Wednesday and Friday he was gone kind of thing. So it was still quick. And then so I knew how to handle a quick death. Albeit different from the next 3, it was still really hard. And I looked for windows, and sometimes I found myself, you're crying yourself to sleep. And sometimes my husband would say, "You were crying in your sleep last night. Did you know that?" And I said, "No, I had no idea." And he goes, "Well, I guess it's seeping out because it has to." And
Oh,
I was like, "That's exactly probably what's happening." And your body, was getting whatever it could when it could. It's stolen moments, if you will. And like I said, for me, it was while I was driving. And then sometimes it was when I was making breakfast and I had to get out the door with the kids and, you know, or get myself to work. And thank heavens I had a 35-minute drive to work because I would bawl my eyes out all the way to work. And on each and every one of these deaths, I would do it. And the only one I didn't do that with was my father because I had stopped working by then. But I'm quite certain I would be doing it if that was the case.
yeah.
But that's for me the difference between pressing on is sort of a very intermittent, happens when it can, but the function is sort of a very cognizant thing, for me.
There's a concept, not to turn this into like an intellectualized thing, because I, as you know, and we're not going there today, but the amount of losses I've had have been
Yes.
absolutely astounding.
Hmm.
And every single loss is so different. And when they start compounding and you go into this bereavement overload, you still have this thing where you've got to try to figure out, like you said, how do I get the kids to school? I need to make dinner. I got to, like, all
Yeah.
this restoration.
You got to brush your
Yeah,
teeth.
you got to brush
You
your teeth.
got to do the simple things.
Although lots of people don't get to a point
Some
where they're
people don't get out of bed for a
no,
year,
they don't. They don't. You're
Yeah.
right. And then you have to oscillate though
Yeah.
into being able to experience and lean into the feelings and
Hmm.
then get back. And when you go back and forth like that,
Yeah.
when you learn how to oscillate,
Yeah.
as crappy as this all feels and as painful as it is, if you're able to find a way, even in little tiny ways,
Yeah.
that find a way to oscillate just a little bit, the coping becomes more possible
Yeah.
than if you stay stuck into either one of those, like just in like
Yeah.
this definitely.
Yeah.
And it makes more sense to be leaning in one way or another. I mean, and different
Yeah.
people do that in different ways. Like
Yeah.
sometimes men are more socialized to, I'm
Mhm.
going to do things, and women are more socialized into,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to feel it. But that's just not
Well,
the
I
reality. You know
and
what I mean? For a lot of people, you have to be
yeah,
able to do both.
you
And what you
do.
like when you are paralyzed from being numb and angry and lost and overwhelmed by
Mhm.
not, getting knocked down and having to pick yourself right the heck back up,
Yeah.
and trying to figure out how each one of those losses is different, and yet they're all one big loss.
Yeah.
So you're grieving them
Yeah.
individually, but then grieving them as a like
Yeah,
a
it's 4
shock, like,
times
yeah,
the weight. It's
yeah,
4 ti like, how do you
and each different,
yeah. And
and
then
the weight is different. Yeah,
you also have the dynamic, at least in my life, you have the dynamic of so my sister and I were the only children that my parents had,
right.
right? And my mother died, my sister died, I'm the only one left. My father, I became everything to him, which his children were always everything to him. And I'm thankful I can say that my kids are everything to me too, but I think it was harder because my father's also disabled, as I had mentioned. So it was an added, which I would do it over, and I would do it the same way every time for him. um, I had to be there for him in a way that, he had lost something really severe, and he loved my mother until the day she died, even though they divorced twice. And he was literally in the room when she died with us. And so he lost her, he lost my sister, and then it was like all lights are on me, And I'm like, I how the hell am I going to be what he needs me to be
Right.
when I can't even be that for myself right now?
Yep.
And that is something that it's just an added component, when it happens, depending on when it happens in your life. My father had his faith, and so he did put a lot of his struggle in that. He would have dinner with my sister every night via a picture on the table.
Oh,
We would have dinner with her, and every night he would put the picture there and have dinner with her, and that was part of his coping.
yeah.
And I was like, "Dude,
Leading a
that would
bond with,
wreck me," you know?
yeah.
But for him, it was good, but I do remember having an explosion, and I am not above it. I mean, I went through all the things, and I exploded in this particular room at my father one time because I said, "I can't be everything for you."
Right.
And that was the worst thing I ever said to him, and the hardest thing I ever had to say to him, because I'm like, I can't bring her back.
But it is the truth.
It is the truth, and I
It's
couldn't
painful.
do it anymore.
And that happens when you lose the siblings, like the roles that
Yeah.
people play in the family. And like you end up I think within a family, often the responsibility of taking care of the parent
Mhm.
in a lot of cases overrides the parent being able to be available for the surviving
Absolutely.
sibling. And that's a
Absolutely.
whole nother podcast that we're going to do is
We could do that one too. Yeah.
we're going to do that one.
Your followers are gonna get really sick of seeing me.
Well, they're going to be sick of hearing about all the freaking law.
Yeah.
No, I think that this is going to be so important for people to hear. I mean, one of the things you
Yeah.
said, I don't want to bypass it because I know that this is going to
And I've made
gonna have
notes to bring some things up too, so go
good.
ahead.
Well, they can turn this into a 3-part,
Yeah,
When I
sure.
say they, I mean the people
The
that
service, yes.
yeah. But you had said that you felt really angry afterwards.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
And so there when you look at loss by suicide,
Mhm.
the range of emotions that you can have and how quickly they can, some people, and this is going to be hard for some people to hear, but
Yeah.
this is the truth. And I'm
Yeah.
not just like making this up because this is
Right,
what I
right.
see, but the truth is some people feel relieved because this person has created chaos and has
Yeah.
multiple suicide
Mhm.
attempts and has created pain in the family, and
Yeah.
you might have been drug and alcohol use and all of everything that has happened over the years, and
Yeah.
they feel this relief and then immediately feel guilt
Right.
for the
Hell
relief.
yeah.
It totally makes
Oh,
sense,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they don't want to say it because
No.
already they're afraid to tell
Because they
people.
feel like they're a horrible person for
Exactly.
feeling that way.
Exactly. And
Well,
also the whole, like, the family not wanting to tell other people that they
yeah,
died by suicide. I've
yeah,
worked with many people
yeah,
who don't even want to tell other people that
yeah,
they've died by suicide because
yeah,
it's so
yeah.
stigmatized. You know what I mean? They don't understand
Mhm.
this. It's not like somebody's going through life and everything's going great, and then one day they just say, you know what? I don't feel like I have the right to live, or I don't feel like I have the right or the ability to cope with this
Mhm.
any longer, or this pain. But you wouldn't, and then people feeling guilty, like I should have known, because
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
people who have got loved ones who have died by suicide that where there was some like indication over
Mhm,
time that something was
mhm,
good.
mhm.
And then there's other people who feel blindsided by it. Like they had
Yeah.
no idea things were not
I
going well.
I
And
think
both they're painful in their own right, in my opinion.
100%. I think that there's a few things that we can say here that might benefit someone. And I think one of them is that it's never the survivor's fault that someone took their own life and
Okay,
completed
you need to say more
suicide.
about that because that
It's
people
it
use
is
that
yeah,
killing.
I know, and it's hard. And so when I started investigating and educating myself, that when I had the recollection and the I don't know, when the realization, I guess is the better word for it, that my sister was at risk. So it was, she had her first attempt, which technically maybe wasn't an attempt because she hadn't taken enough, to of meds and whatnot to
But
do
she was
that.
playing with
But
it.
she was playing with it,
Yeah,
yeah.
she was
And
she was there.
in that case, that's when I started researching, and I'm a little bit of a geek when it comes to medical research, so you know this. So,
I
that
can
being
name every
said,
single medication I've ever taken and gone, "All right,
I know.
why is my
Why
oncologist
do I feel
telling
this way? Why yeah.
me?"
So, I think I started doing research and I started learning, and for anyone that is watching this that has experienced this or is afraid they're going to experience this either for themselves or for family or friends or whoever, coworkers, strangers,
Mhm.
go to the AFSP site, and there is a list that they provide on the site of risk factors. The first time I went on that site and I looked at that list, I lost it because my sister had all but one of the risk factors that were on there.
What
But
did you
nobody freaking talks about it. So I didn't know. Like I didn't know about it. And then when you look back at it and you know, granted, our situation did not turn out well in the end. But, you know, you still should go learn and you still should go figure it out. And when I looked at it, I was like, gosh, this is every single possible risk that you can have here.
can you name a
And say again.
can you name a few?
um I can't off the top of my head.
Okay. Alright, so
um
previous traumas,
yeah, for sure.
previous mental
For
illness,
sure.
is,
Yeah, I mean,
poor
we can maybe
poor coping
link it to
skills.
that list when we're done, if that's something that this can do.
Yeah.
But I would say definitely look at that. That is actually, in the end, one of the things that helped me heal was the AFSP, Out of the Darkness walk, because I didn't know what to do and where to put it. I didn't know where to put my grief. I didn't know how to manage it. Um, I don't think most people do.
Did
And
you know
and
anybody else who had a loved one who died by suicide?
I did, but
Mm,
it was, I don't even know how to explain it. I mean, I feel like I didn't give myself the luxury of digging into that, um, based on everything else that was happening in my life. Like I just, and I all I can say is, well, I had all these other losses and then I had a life that I had to still do. And so I didn't go seek it out as much as I probably could have early on.
but, I mean, it sounds to me that there were a lot of mitigating factors that would have kept that from happening, and
A
then
ton.
you did find a group, the American Foundation for Suicide,
Yes.
Prevention. The Center for Grief and Trauma Therapy, we sponsor them every single year. We go there with all the materials and all.
Mhm.
But you're right. I mean, to be surrounded by a group of individuals who
Mhm.
are able to say openly,
Yeah.
like, we have lost this person to suicide, and here's a group of people, here's just one person, and
Yeah.
it's not like shoved down, and it's
Yeah.
opened up. It sounds like having
It's
that
a
was incredibly
safe it's a
healing.
safe
It's
place.
a safe place.
And I think, it was a 15 or 18-mile walk overnight in Philly.
Mhm.
And, all of my friends, my family, my coworkers, everybody supported me in doing it. It was great. I felt seen, I felt understood.
Mhm.
Um, you know, the one thing that I think has improved, since this happened in our family, is that there are specific grief groups now, whereas when I was doing it, when I was suffering, I went to a grief group, but I only went once. And I can't even remember the details, but it was a general loss group. And it wasn't just people who lost a sister. It was people who lost a child, people who lost a spouse, people who lost a mother, a father, and an uncle, whatever. And everybody was in the same room. And when I was going through it, I needed a very specific kind of support. And those generic groups, while better than nothing, because you do feel you're not alone, and that is very helpful, I feel that, that was not at my disposal back then. And it is now. You can do all. And with the advent of social media through that period, and now there are Facebook groups and Instagrams and all the things, for people with very specific situations.
Yeah.
And I would encourage anyone who's watching this for support to seek them out. I know that it's a lot of work to find those things sometimes, and not everybody has someone that could say, hey, check this, or hey, check that. But if you are not the one that lost someone, and you are with someone who has, and you're trying to support them, do the legwork for them. Sit down with the computer, get a list, make a list for them, because they're grieving so hard that they don't even know which direction to go in. Make a list, give it to them, share it with them, tell them you love them, give it to them and say, I don't know how to help you, but this is what I'm trying to do, And I think that's part of what this is, being able to give back to someone. I mean, and to identify the things that I didn't have, that I would have liked to have had. And you don't know it when you're going through it. And there's another piece to this puzzle. If you indulge me a little further, one of the risk factors that comes to mind when you mentioned, do I know what they are? Can I mention them? The one that she didn't have was she didn't have another family member who completed suicide. And we say completed, we don't say committed. And it's important, and every time I hear someone say it, I correct them, because we need to help.
We even say died by suicide. We stopped saying completed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. It's commit is.
You have to change that narrative.
You do.
So, she didn't have that. There wasn't someone that we lost to suicide before her, but it raises the percentage of risk tremendously. And we ended up feeling that in our family, because her son suffered all through, grieving his mother. And he had a run with trying to take his own life. And that impacted our family tremendously. He was not successful, thank heavens. And he was cared for and found, and, has gone through a lot to get where he is today. But that was another layer in the family, and a very difficult layer, and that's a hard one, because being one of the survivors and one of the people that cared about these children and loved these children so much, to see that almost come to fruition, there's some worry there too, because then you're like, what could I have done? And you do feel that. Now, I know as an educated adult on this, that it's not something I could have done, that I could have changed or anything to avoid that for this child, to have, stopped that. I mean, we periodically met, we had deep conversations, he shared with me, we supported each other and all of the things, but there's a genetic component, there's an emotional component, there's a lot of pieces to this that all play into what happens to the survivors when that starts in a family. And thankfully, we have him today,
Yeah.
and it was a really hard thing, and it was tough on my family as well.
Yeah.
So, it's all I will say is, to that is, I caution folks that have a loss by suicide in their family. Look deeper, stay alert. You may not be able to change that if it's happening in your life, but you just do what you can do. You do what you can do. You ask questions. Are you okay? Is there something I can do for you? Would you like to have a conversation? And you do it without accusation. You do it with love and just, I've cried with him so many times. We, you know, you don't have to hide how you feel about it. You don't have to hide that it hurts you. You don't have to, the people that either attempt or die by suicide, they know that it hurts the people around them, and they know it will. But that doesn't mean they can get out of their own way and out of their own head. My sister wasn't able to do that. She wasn't able to get past it. Um, but you can. People can get past it. They can grow through it. They can get the support that they need. And if they need medication, they can get medication. But there has to be an open dialogue. There has to be an open conversation to let them know, hey, if you want someone to go to the doctors with you, I'll go with you. If you want to talk about the medications and what they're doing to your body, because they're not all great, some are good, some aren't so good. It's like finding a therapist. You've got to find the right medication sometimes. And often folks that have attempted, at least in my experience, they may go, no more meds for me. They didn't help me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, but did you go off of them when you were feeling good? And then you were like, oh, I feel good. I'm going to go off of them, whether they do it abruptly, which is not advised medically, or if they do it gradually. It's something that needs to be followed up with the clinician. And you need to pay attention to how you're feeling. And if you know a loved one or a friend or someone that's going to attempt to go off of a medication that has been helping them, check in with them. Check in with them. Ask them how they're feeling. Ask them if they have any suicidal ideation. Talk about it. It's hard. I'm not going to lie. It is really hard to have those conversations, and it hurts a lot. But if you can have the conversation, maybe you can save a life. Maybe you can.
You're making so many important points here, and I can see how passionately and deeply you feel about this. One of the things that I'm really hearing you say is, don't make this quiet and don't put stigma around it. The person may be already struggling with that.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to be there, you don't have to say, well, at least she's not suffering anymore. And, that she struggled so much, maybe she's happier in heaven or whatever. And you just want to look at that person and shake them, be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, no. So we have to be really careful about how we are talking to people in general who have a loss.
Yeah.
And then a whole another layer of some people said some pretty crappy things to me after, after Damien died. And I mean, some of the things that people say, you just want to stab them in the neck with a fork. It's amazing.
Oh yeah.
So the one thing I'm hearing you say is, don't keep it quiet. Don't be afraid to say Maria's name.
Yeah.
Be afraid to allow her to continue to be in your life.
Share a memory.
Share the memory.
Yeah.
Share the memories. Ask them, hey, you know what? One of my favorite memories of Maria is, and you share, you get in there and you share that. And then the other part of this that I'm hearing is, you said this, and I'm going to kind of probably end with this, even though you keep going, but you said you grow through it.
Yes.
And in thinking about making sense out of what's happened, and when I say benefit finding, I don't mean like, I'm so glad this happened.
Yeah.
It's this happened. I can't change what happened.
Right.
I give so many things up
Right.
for what happened.
Oh, yeah.
I can't.
Hmm.
So I'm going to acknowledge that and I'm going to be with it. But what can I do something about it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's the benefit? And then shifting how you understand who you are in the world while having what we would call, in this case, more of like a post-traumatic growth.
Yes.
Like, how do you grow through? Because sometimes when you talk
Yeah.
to people, it's like, my daughter took her own life and she was 14 years old.
Yeah.
And she did this in some traumatic way. And you want me to figure out how to grow through this? Are you out of your
Yeah.
effing
I
mind?
know. It seems
Like,
absurd, right?
it's absurd. And I totally,
100%.
how do you even, you can't even wrap your head around something like that.
Right.
So when you say, though, I would never ever look at somebody and be
Yeah.
like, you know what? It's been a year. You really
No, I
need
know.
to
God.
like start
Right.
dating again. Like, are
Yeah.
you kidding me? Right. So what, when you say you grow through
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
you've had, and
Uh,
and we won't even get into the fact that you've lost your dad
yeah.
as well. And I mean,
Hmm.
Christ, we haven't even gone there. We'll
Yeah.
just
We'll do another one.
have 4 more episodes.
Yeah.
So can you say more
Hmm.
about in what way
Yeah.
you have grown and how
Sure.
you've changed as a
Yeah.
person as a result?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of different ways, and some of the key ones for me are, I have grown in that I pay more attention to other people's emotions. Not just my own, because that's inherent. I think, but I pay more attention to people who I think are struggling. You recognize things in them because of what you've gone through.
Mhm.
Nobody wants to go through that, right? That's just something you would never wish on anyone. But you consume knowledge and you have a higher empathy because you felt it in some angle, some facet of this whole puzzle. I have mine, my niece and nephew have theirs, their father, all of our kids, my husband. We all have a different way that it hit us, right? Some of it overlaps, but you have to you keep it a little more in the forefront of your mind somehow. And you know I don't know how to explain how you do it, but but when you see someone struggling, you just ask them, are they okay? That's all you have to say is, are you okay? Would you like to talk? I'm here. Here's my number. And to strangers, you can meet a stranger. I've run into people crying in a store. Are you okay? Is there something I can do for you? Because you don't know why they're crying. They may never tell you why they're crying, but if they thought that one person gave a rat's ass about what's happening to them, maybe they could start to heal themselves. You know what I'm saying? And I think so. That's one way, is being more empathetic to other people, and recognizing things that you've learned in hindsight from your own life to apply in the future and the current state. Um, Paying attention to, and that would apply to your own family, your own children, your own whoever is in your immediate circle. I mean, my kids, both of my kids have struggled with difficulty over all of these things that we've talked about. They've both done therapy. They've both, and I think being able to admit to yourself that you don't have all the answers. And it's okay that you don't have all the answers. And you're going to be angry. And it's okay. And there's no timeline on how long you're going to be angry. You have to give yourself grace. And that's one of the other things that you grow through. And it prepares you for future difficulties, not just losses, but future difficulties. And I'll give a plug here for some transcendental meditation, which I think is, um, if you have never meditated, I would recommend it. There's lots of different kinds. It doesn't have to be hokey, and there's a kind for everybody. There's a
Right.
flavor for everyone.
Right.
But finding some peace within yourself and realizing that you're, you know, you're human and you're not to blame for, um, actions that other people take. You can be upset with them, you can be angry, but in the end, I think the most important thing to take away from it is healthy people don't die by suicide. Healthy people don't die by suicide. I could say it 100 times. People who die by suicide are ill. They have a mental illness, a struggle. There's something in there, whether it's biology, chemistry, I don't know. There's difference in everybody that it happens to, right? But if they were healthy, truly healthy, they would not make that choice. And so you can't, in the end, it takes a long time to get there. I'll be honest. You know, you start out mad as hell, and then when you go through rites of passage for people in your life, children, when they get married, when they have children, I'm going through all of that now with these guys. You know, you can still be a little bitter. It's okay that they're missing out on all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who've left us are missing out, but those of us who are still here, the survivors, we're missing out too. And you're allowed to be upset about it. You're allowed to feel it, and you're allowed to express it. And please find someone, if you're searching for mates and companions, that has empathy and kindness and understanding and can carry that weight with you, because you shouldn't do it by yourself. And if you want to be single the rest of your life, be single, but surround yourself with friends that understand you.
Mm-hmm.
Educate them and yourself. You know, I really think that that's how you grow through it, is to not put it on a shelf, because, and I'm a culprit, I've compartmentalized a lot of my trouble and grief over the years. I think eventually it comes out, but I definitely could have done a better job of doing that. But I think all my mitigating circumstances made that even harder for me. And I accept that. You know, I accept whatever part of that trickled down into my family. And I've spoken to my kids about that, and I've owned those pieces. And, growth doesn't stop when you're an adult, it keeps going for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter how old you are, you can still grow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I think you grow through it.
You can grow and be in pain at the same time.
Yeah.
You can grow.
You kind of have to.
You have to. And
we come together.
You'll have the surges. Those are normal.
Yeah.
And it could be because you drove by a blue car and your sister used to drive a blue car.
Hell yeah.
Like we don't
Lots
have
of triggers.
Holidays and birthdays and all the things. And those might too. And different people in your life might all be grieving in different ways and may have different feelings in you. And you guys have to navigate that and give space for that.
Yeah. And you have to find what works for you.
Yeah.
Right. And if that means, you're going for a walk every day, and some people are very ritualistic, and doing some rituals can really help, whether it's, keeping a photo, or, some ashes, or, I took my sister's ashes and I sent them away to a lovely woman in California who made sun catchers and beads and rings and bracelets and things that you can have with you. And I gave all of my family members pieces of that, so that they can have their mom on a chain, or, find what works for you. And it may take a long time to find that.
Absolutely.
And it may shift. In the beginning, it may be one thing, and a year later, 10 years later, 20 years later, it may be different. But you have to give yourself grace and give yourself time and just patience with yourself and with other people who are suffering. Yeah. You're never suffering alone. You just may not know other people are suffering.
Right.
But ask. It's a lot, right?
It's a lot. It is heavy, but I know that our episode of surviving suicide, I knew, and there's other people, other clinicians who specialize in working with people who are survivors of suicide. This isn't the last time we're going to talk about this, because this is a big topic, and I am sure that we have both said things today that some people might find really distasteful, and other people may find it
It's a very
liberating and
subjective. Yeah,
thank God somebody is saying something about this, because
sure.
they are too afraid to say these things to anybody
Mhm.
outside,
Yeah,
or maybe even too afraid to say things to themselves.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but I just thank you so much for being so courageous to share all of your story. And this is just going to keep,
yeah,
this is going to keep with me
yeah.
a lot.
I'm happy to help, and if you
I know.
need, more, or if there are questions that need be answered, I'm happy to participate.
I,
Whatever we can do to keep the awareness up, and it is coming up. Suicide prevention is, very strong and heavy between August and October. There's a
yeah,
lot of events.
there's a
Um,
suicide walk in here in Delaware on the 20th, I think. And that's the
yeah,
one that we do every single year as an
yeah.
organization. And
And you
there
don't have to walk.
won't
If
have
you
to walk.
can't walk, you can be at a tent to support people.
Just be
You
there.
can be handing out Band-Aids for blisters.
Yep.
You can do whatever you want, or you can just be there,
You can just,
and not talk to anybody if you don't want to. Like,
yeah,
you may find comfort in that,
you might.
you know?
And I do want to make sure that we say this before we
Mhm.
end today, that if you or somebody else is is struggling emotionally, or is thinking about suicide, or
Mhm.
have attempted suicide, or is having that ideation, 988 is the national number that they came up with. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, you have to dial 911, but they don't want to deal with the police. Okay, fine, don't.
Yeah,
Call 988. Do go to
right.
your local emergency room.
Yeah,
Get that immediate help that's
yeah,
available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
yeah,
And get what, like you said, whatever support you need in order to
yeah,
keep yourself safe.
yeah.
And I don't want anybody to forget about that. There are hotlines for veterans. There are
Yes.
hotlines for the LGBTQ population.
Mhm.
Please, make sure you see these. And if you guys have questions or comments, or want to give feedback on our,
Sure.
podcast today, please place those in there. Share your story if you want to.
Mhm.
Just put it out there. What are your thoughts about this? Did some
Yeah,
part of this piss you off? Okay, that's fine.
yeah,
Let's get it out
right.
there. Do you feel as if somebody finally talked about something you've been too afraid to talk about?
Yeah,
What would you like to share? And I just want you to know that I know for you that you have grown, and I don't want our listeners and our viewers to forget that it's through challenge that we awaken that power to heal.
yeah. It's true.
It
It's
is.
hard, but it's true.
It's hard, but it's true. So everybody stay tuned. I'm sure we'll continue to look at so many of these difficult topics, and um, find even more courageous people willing to be vulnerable and share their story. And
Thanks for having me, Chrissy, and thanks for letting me share this. I know it's a challenge, but,
I found it I found it a I, I'm honored
that's
and
my
I
thank
feel very valued and lucky to have somebody like you who's willing to share her story. So
thank
thank you
you.
for doing this. And I
Yes,
love you lots.
you too.
Thanks for listening to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. If this episode helped, subscribe and share it with someone who needs it. We'll see you next time.